The next team that we're going to preview is the Portland Trailblazers, who had another bad season. This was their first year post-Damian Lillard, but they came into the season with the number 3 overall pick in Scoot Henderson. The main thing with them is they just have a lot of guards, as we talked about. They have Scoot Henderson, Shaden Sharp, and Anthony as well. But what do you guys think this team needs to do to improve, and how do you guys think that they should handle their guard room?
Yeah, Portland's in a really tough spot. They're the anti-Pistons in a way to where they have way too many guards. They are also a team that is pressing up against the first apron, something that you do not want to be unless you're an elite level team, especially with the amount of restrictions that it comes to team building. So first, I would expect them to move some of their veteran pieces. They have a couple guys they acquired around the Dame trade and the subsequent Drew Holiday trade that are prime trade candidates. Malcolm Brogdon, Robert Williams, those are guys that I would definitely keep an eye on for as potential trade targets this summer. But I'm also very interested to see what they do with Jeremy Grant. He's someone they just paid, but I just don't see them, especially pressing up against the first apron. I can't see them stomaching that number for a super long time. So I would say I looked for them to be aggressive on that front, getting away from the apron and probably picking up more young players. As far as who they should draft, I think this is another team that they need to go wing. I feel like they have a decent amount of front court depth, like no one that I'm necessarily married to, but Ayton did play better down the second half of the season, like especially towards the end, he really started to pick it up. So I would say for them, this is another Ricochet team that I would be really eyeing. For me, their team, kind of like the Pistons, they don't have a ton of shooting, especially if you're going to build around Scoot, he was like your premier guy. You just drafted him. He's the marquee. So if you're going to build around him, you need to get guys who can shoot the ball around him. Simons is a good start. Shaden he's been okay as a shooter, but I don't think him playing the 3 is sustainable, so I would definitely look to get a shooting wing.
Another interesting point, too. I know we talk about Simons as a younger guard, and he's 24 years old, but he's also going into the 24-25 season. He'll be on the second to last year of his contract. And I feel like with their backcourt situation, obviously they're not going to rock with those guys. And I feel like it really depends on what type of leap Henderson makes next year. I know he had one of probably the worst rookie seasons, but even still, we've seen with guys like Darius Garland that it is still possible to come back better, and I still think there is a lot to like with Henderson. But with Simons, I feel like you also have Shaden Sharp there, who I feel like is kind of his development's kind of being hindered a little bit, and he's obviously got a lot of upside as well. It'd be interesting to see when they kind of decide to make their decision. I doubt it'll probably be this season, but in the off season after that, potentially in the draft, it'll be kind of interesting to see if they do get a wing, or if they are just more of a team who's not necessarily focused on fit, but just want to get all the talent they can. Personally, I'm more of a wing, even getting a switchable big, because I feel like obviously the bigs that they have right now don't really fit the timeline of the core guys they're trying to build around. But Ayton has a massive $34 million per year contract. He's got 2 years left too. So it's like, I feel like they're just in a very weird spot in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like we're talking a lot about Shaden Sharp and his development this year. He only played in 32 games, so it is a little bit like just after playing in a bunch in his rookie year, it says he played in 80 games. Going from that to 32 games in his sophomore season is just like a huge difference. And he did average almost 16 points in that stretch of games. So wasn't a great year, but I feel like he still has flashed that potential to be that starting 2 or 3 on the wing. But I'm with you. I feel like you have to figure out a way in the front court to match with somebody with DeAndre Ayton, just because that contract no one's going to trade for that, and you're obviously not just going to cut someone like that. So figuring out either a power forward that can work with that, maybe that's stretching like a Cody Williams into the 4 spot, even though he's only 6'8". He doesn't necessarily, just based on what we saw in Colorado, he doesn't necessarily need the ball in his hands a lot to be effective. So I'm thinking maybe that's an option, or trying to pair up DeAndre Ayton with more of like a defensive-focused front court member. Obviously, Donovan Clingan is probably more like that than Alex Sarr, just because I don't know if the Blazers will actually get that top pick. They would have to be kind of lucky to get up there. So looking at someone like Donovan Clingan, yeah, Ayton doesn't provide great spacing, but he can stretch out to at least the mid-range area. So having a lot of that size up in front with more of like a defensive anchor with Clingan could be an option for them.
Yeah, I like Clingan a lot. I think he definitely should go high. I would be a little concerned if Portland took him, because then you have him, Ayton, and Scoot, who you all have to play, and none of you can shoot. So that would be interesting to see how Chauncey Billups would handle that spacing wise. I would say that's why I think Sarr would maybe be the better fit. Also, though, I don't know if they'll get that high in the draft. I would say this is also a really good Tyler Smith team. I feel like he provides a little bit of defense, like not the best, but he can block a shot. He can step out and shoot it really well. And he's someone that doesn't need the ball, so he's not redundant at all with any of their guards. So I think he would be someone who if I was Portland, I would maybe try to trade down if someone else falls in love with one of like the top guys. Because while we all like Smith a lot, I don't think he's necessarily projected to go within like the top 5, top 10. So I would say that would be, if I was Portland, I would definitely be calling around the league trying to move down and take him.
Yeah, they're going into the lottery with the 4th best odds, but there are a couple teams that in the later lottery have a couple extra picks. So if they do want to go maybe trade number 4 for a couple picks in the later lottery just to add more talent to this team, which I feel like is obviously one of their bigger needs, because, you know, Matisse Thybulle and just a couple of these other guys, like Malcolm Brogdon is someone that's a name, but just how much are you really going to fit on that timeline with such young players like that? So maybe a trade into the mid-lottery, later lottery could be beneficial for them.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what they're going to do with all their like veteran players, especially because they'll have value. Like Brogdon is a really good guard, and he's someone who has playoff experience. He could be big for a lot of teams. Williams, we've seen how he can just completely dominate the game on the interior, block shots. That's someone I wouldn't be surprised if they maybe want to hold on to if they think they can get good within the next 3 to 4 years. But with his injury history, I think it's more of a right now thing with him. So I can also see them trading him. Anthony Simons is someone that I'm a really big fan of. But if you're married to Scoot Henderson, which you have to assume they are, given they just used a top 3 pick on him last season, I would seriously consider trading him, especially while his value's decently high. He's someone who averaged 22 points a game last year, shot 38% from 3, 5.5 assists. He's someone who has dealt with injuries at times, but he's someone I think that teams probably value pretty decently around the league. And with his contract coming to the end, like you said, here shortly, he's due for a big payday. And you're already against the apron. You definitely don't want to go into the second apron whatsoever, especially because you're still, in any case scenario, most likely 3 to 4 years away from seriously contending for anything. So Simons is someone I think they can get a lot back for. I think they should prioritize getting that front court piece necessarily that we were talking about to pair along with Ayton. I think that would be something I would look for in a trade for Simons. I would say if you're Portland, definitely make sure you're sure about Scoot Henderson before you trade Simons. I know they still probably like him, especially because guards, it's really hard to judge after your first season. Like, most of them are all pretty awful. But like you said with Darius Garland, there's players that are able to shake back from a bad year like that to start. So I think this is definitely a conversation around trading Simons, at least. It's definitely a conversation more for the trade deadline next year. Like if Scoot's showing enough, then I think, especially at the trade deadline where teams would be desperate to make a playoff push, GMs are on the clock, I think he'll have even more value than he has now as long as he doesn't get injured. So it'll be an interesting offseason and next season for the Trailblazers.
Simons is even on the record. Okay, is it Simmons or Simons? Simons, okay. But Simons is also on the record saying, too, that I believe it was a few weeks ago, he said that he wants to win now. And he was in an interview and they were talking about like kind of the phase that the Trailblazers are in, but he said he's acknowledged that he's in like his 6th or 7th year, which is kind of crazy when you're only 24. But he was talking about that and how he knows where the Trailblazers are, but he still wants to be a winning player on a winning team. And I think that will be an interesting development to follow. I don't think he'll necessarily have the same value as Dame, and I don't know if he'll necessarily try to request a trade at the deadline, but I think with his years kind of expiring and with the timeline of the team, you do have to kind of consider that.